This past year, we've heard of more and more attacks on various religious groups around the world. It appears as though our planet is becoming a less tolerant place, a place that is no longer safe for Christians. To talk more about it is Reverend Gary Stagg, Executive Director of Open Doors Canada. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Gary.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Gary, Open Doors did some research into the 50 most dangerous countries to practice one's faith as a Christian throughout the world and the World Watch List. Tell me a bit about that list.
Yeah, the World Watch List we've been producing for 26 years now, and it ranks the top 50 countries in the world where it's most dangerous to live as a Christian. Some of the areas that are of concern, of course, North Korea is always an area of concern. It's been on the list since 2002 as number one. So a long time there as number one, still the most dangerous place to live in the world. There are also some areas of concern that have come as a surprise to us. For instance, Burkina Faso in Africa. And of course, we're hearing lots of news coming out of there with regards to persecution of Christians. And it just seems to be ramping up even as we speak. Just a few days ago, a pastor and a deacon were killed. And that's an area of great concern for us as well.
Why does Open Doors produce this list each and every year? And how do you actually go about ranking the countries?
Well, we do it to monitor what's happening with Christian persecution around the world. We want to keep an eye on what's happening so that we can respond to the needs. The methodology for the World Watch List is actually a 64-page document, which I don't think you'd want me to go through the whole 64 pages. But there's a number of indicators that we use. Oftentimes, when people think of persecution, their minds automatically go to violence. But the reality is, for most of them, it's just a daily squeeze on their lives because of them, just the fact that they're Christians. And it may be something like not being able to get a job because of their faith, or their children not being able to get a proper schooling because of their faith. And so there's that daily squeeze. But then we also have the areas of violence around the world. Some of those are Burkina Faso is what I mentioned, and places like Pakistan, where we see a lot of violence, in Nigeria, a lot of violence there against Christians. But it's not all about violence. It's also about that daily squeeze that Christians endure on a daily basis.
Gary, let's talk a bit about Nigeria and Boko Haram. I've heard countless stories about some of the herdsmen from Boko Haram. They actually leave the northern part of Nigeria, go to the south, and just wipe out Christian villages because they want the water for their cattle, I guess some of their livestock. Why isn't the Nigerian government doing more to protect its own people?
We are constantly trying to advocate for the Christians that are there, using all the means that we can here in Canada, with lobbying our MPs and government officials, and trying to get them to put some pressure on the Nigerian officials so that they will do something about it. Of course, all of these things can be very dicey and political things that are going on, and be quite honest, sometimes they just want to turn a blind eye to what's happening in these situations. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
Now, when we talk about persecution, how do you actually define the term?
Well, persecution, persecution is a very broad term, of course. And Scripture says that if you are going to live a godly life, you will be persecuted. However, Open Doors focuses on what we call the most persecuted. And so we go to areas where there is high levels of persecution, very high levels of persecution, and extreme levels of persecution. And our World Watch List indicates those categories. And so on the World Watch List, those are the top 50 countries. However, there's persecution in more than 50 countries around the world. There's persecution in a lot more countries than that. But yeah, it's the high levels of persecution that we're responding to, because people here in Canada some people would say, well, we're persecuted as well, and that may very well be true on a certain level. But our mandate is to go to the most persecuted.
I think for most of us living here in Canada, Gary, we don't have a proper perspective on the persecuted church. I mean, our lives are not in jeopardy each and every day. Can you share some of the day-to-day struggles that people and local churches in these countries are actually going through?
Well, let me talk to you about Burkina Faso for a moment. And this past year has been a horrific year for them. 2019. And back in April, a gang of bikers came to the church, or they weren't bikers, but they were people on motorcycles, I would put it that way. And they came to a church. Then they took six people, six men from the church, including the pastor, and brought them outside and shot them. There was only just one person that survived that attack that particular day. But that's just one indication. And I mentioned already that even last week there was a pastor and a deacon that were killed. That's some of the situations that we face with persecution.
What can our viewers really do to help our persecuted brothers and sisters around the globe?
Well, if you ask them, of course, their answer is always, please pray for us. That's what they ask for, and don't forget about us. So we're just really trying to tell their story so that people can be more effective in praying for the persecuted church, because that's what they really want. And then to not forget about them. And the way that we don't forget about them is to be informed. So we need to be praying, and we also need to be informed. And that's where organizations like Open Doors and other organizations come in, where we tell the stories of the persecuted church. We monitor what's going on all around the world, and then we're able to put tools in the hands of people so that they can effectively pray for our brothers and sisters around the world who are suffering persecution. The reality is that we are all one body, and so if one part suffers, it says we all suffer.
Gary, new laws were introduced in various towns in Texas and churches allowing the parishioners to actually bear arms to protect the congregants from people coming in and opening fire and killing so many people. We've seen that time and time again in the United States. How about something similar in some of these volatile countries where Christians are being persecuted and their lives are in danger? Can we protect them? Can we allow them to arm themselves and fight back?
Well, we don't look at that as something that Jesus would do. I mean, he said, turn the other cheek, didn't he? And so these Christians are there to not just, they're not in a defense mode. They're actually in a mode where they want to reach their communities. And they feel very called to stay. We're not an organization that tries to even take them out of persecution, but rather an organization that helps them to stay and to be the light of Christ right where they are. And so we would not advocate taking up arms against the people that they're actually trying to reach. So
Now, what kind of feedback do you get from Christians who are receiving help through Open Doors?
such overwhelming response from them, and really grateful for all that Canadians are doing to help them. And it just means so much to know, for them to know that people stand with them and are praying for them. And we just get lots of feedback from them about how appreciative they are.
What are some of the biggest challenges you face when working with some of the local governments or churches in some of these volatile regions?
I think just we have to really be very careful about our presence there, and it makes it very difficult because you're just constantly being watched in many of these countries. And so just kind of trying to go under the radar is one of the biggest challenges that we face.
Let's talk about China. Now, this is a nation that's a huge trading partner of ours. It's becoming quite modernized, but is it still government persecution of Christians? Is it getting better or worse in China?
Oh, it's actually getting far worse in China. We've seen a real increase in just the past couple of years of, and the one thing about China is that we're seeing persecution go digital. The world is going digital. And what we're seeing in China is that persecution is going digital as well. And by that, I mean that the government have required all churches to install cameras in their sanctuaries in their places where they meet so that they can monitor everything that's going on. And also, they've introduced facial recognition for people when they come into the church. They have to have their face scanned in many cases, and so very difficult for Chinese Christians again to stay under the radar. And so in China right now, in order to use the internet or even to buy a cell phone, they use facial recognition so that they know that they're keeping a record basically of that person. The Christian population in China is now greater than the membership of the Communist Party, and so that poses a great threat to the Chinese government, and they really are paranoid about Christians meeting in groups. And when I say groups, we have house churches in China. Some of those house churches have grown to be a couple of thousand people, and China now, the Christians in China have said that they were becoming more like the West, like mega churches and so on, and looking at that as a model. But now they said we really have to go back to our roots and really establish our home church network again, because that's really the thing that's going to do it for them.
Gary, we've talked about some of the communist governments which are attacking Christians, North Korea, China. What about some of the other religious sects or religious groups, like maybe the Muslim extremists, Buddhists? How about Sikh extremists? Are they also going after Christians in different countries?
Mostly, when it would be mostly what we know of is Muslim extremists and Buddhist extremists and Hindu extremists. It's really a segment of that society. They're the extremists that cause all of the problems. So it just depends on the country. So in India, it would be Hindu extremism. In other countries, I'm thinking in Sri Lanka, we had the big attack last year in Sri Lanka. That was Buddhist extremists. And then, of course, we have Islamic extremists in many of the countries on the World Watch List.
Where can our viewers go to see the entire World Watch List findings?
They can go right to our website at opendoorsca.org, and they can see the whole thing there. They can download the list. There's videos. It's interactive. They can read stories and watch videos on most of these countries there.
Reverend Gary Stagg, Executive Director of Open Doors Canada, thanks for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.